Thank you. I think there's a common theme, thread through all of these answers as to how you get elected as a principled libertarian Republican. And the common theme is hard work and shoe leather. It's a common theme that goes to any candidate, whether they're a libertarian Republican, whether they are a socialist Democrat. Going out there and identifying your voters and meeting your voters and learning what your voters' interests are, and then getting those voters who are inclined to vote for you out to actually vote for you on election day is what retail politics is all about. There'll be a session later on today featuring Vic Baradelli, who's a seasoned political consultant, who will talk a little bit about some of the mechanics of getting elected in a local race. You should look out for that. In the interest of time, I'm going to start taking questions at this point. I think we've got a lot of interesting stories, and I'm going to actually pose the first question. And that is, I'd like each of the panelists to tell us what they believe their singular, just to pick one piece of legislation that they have championed, and whether it's been successful or not, the one piece of legislation that's most important to them in their legislative career. And I'll start with Councilman Halloran.
This year, we had a little bit of a snowstorm you might have heard about in New York City, and it got me Fox News, and it got me CNN, and our sanitation workers decided, because they were upset with the Bloomberg administration, that they were not going to do their job in a timely manner. And we had actually gotten signals that that might happen long before. As soon as we announced there would be cuts to sanitation, there were stirrings that we announced we were going to be demoting some supervisors, and that stirred. I introduced a piece of legislation that would require the city's agencies to turn over documents to any of its elected officials upon request. Right now, believe it or not, your legislators in many of your states cannot compel a state agency or a city agency or an authority to provide them with documents. They have to go through the same FOIL process, Freedom of Information request, that you do as an average citizen. Well, what that does is basically prevent the legislators from understanding where the problems are in the various agencies. So I've created an omnibus bill in the City Council, which is now winding its way through committee, to make all of the city's agencies responsive to every elected official, to have an affirmative obligation to disclose, to, of course, confidentially. I mean, obviously, the legislators are not supposed to, be turning reams of documents over willy-nilly, but it goes to the very core of how government functions. And if you ever thought that a bureaucracy, just looking at on the level was a problem, wait till you see what the internal documents generated are. And New York City, of course, is a $64 billion budget. It's the fourth largest in North America. It goes to the United States government, the government of the state of New York, the government of the state of California, the city of New York, and then Canada. So just to give you a perspective of how much bureaucracy you have to show. So that's my favorite piece of legislation. It's one that's working its way through right now, and it's something designed to bring open and transparency to the governmental process.
That's a great idea. That can be taken elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. I worked on really two or three pieces that were real important. It's hard to rank which one was the most important. I accidentally ended up chair of two committees because no one else wanted it. One was education, and we created charter schools while I was chair of that in Ohio, emulating some of the great work you had done, and we're real proud of that. I also was on the forefront of right to work in Ohio, which I think was a real important issue that has not happened yet because we're close. The consultants would tell me not to say that publicly. But I think the one that I did that I'm most proud of was the regulatory reform bill. It was very obscure. It didn't get any media attention, thus it didn't help me get reelected in and of itself. But it forced every administrative agency. Now, mind you, we had a Republican governor at the time, and he wasn't real happy that I was holding him accountable. But it required every administrative agency rule go before a joint committee, a joint House and Senate committee, and that the agency had to publicly publish the rules, give 90 days for public hearing, and we had to have an opportunity as legislators to review and sign off on them before they went our administrative code. And it set in place a procedure. We had something similar to that already, but we really tightened it up. And as a result, we invalidated throughout over 1,000 EPA rules. I believe it was 52,000 rules totally we were able to throw out in the first year of that existence because agencies were not following the procedures they were supposed to. So we actually made it so those rules were not valid if they hadn't done it. Something I've made a career off of as a lawyer since I was out of office, because it's great to say, well, that rule's not valid anyway. But I think that was the one I'm most proud of, was forcing some of this. The elected officials deal with things you see every day. It's in the newspaper, you know about it. These administrative rules, they're running our businesses and our lives, and they just appear out of nowhere, as if by magic. Some bureaucrat wanted them there. So to force them to go through this process, I think is the thing I'm most proud of.
Thank you. There were a lot of battles and a lot of victories. When you have the freedom to actually represent the people and solve problems, you take on a lot of roles. I chaired the Economic Development Committee when Wisconsin was eking out jobs to other states due to regulations, lack of capital investment that was competitive, et cetera, and wrote the Small Business Regulation Reform Act, and then went on to be the Small Business Administration's choice. It was, I want to give this example because those of you interested in public policy and how to get things done know the strength of the press to be your snow fence. We used them from day one. That was because I was taking fire from both sides of the aisle as well. We had a very active website in 2001, which was somewhat pioneering then, not like it is now. And every press release went to the Madison State Journal, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and I always hired journalists on my staff rather than political bureaucrats. I felt it was very important to have someone on staff that was hungry for the truth and to get things out. The Wisconsin Manufacturing Extension Partnership, although not libertarian, was essential in supporting very small supply chain manufacturers in the state of Wisconsin to keep the large manufacturers who supply a lot of jobs in Wisconsin. That educational program was double matched by the federal government in order to help those small manufacturers with consulting to keep them on the ground and employed. Because of political warfare between our Democrat city governor and my House Speaker, who were trying to show off in front of the press in order to beat their chests as to who was more powerful, we nearly lost a program that was ensuring manufacturing success in the state of Wisconsin, of which we lead in the Midwestern United States in. What I had was 24 hours. I had the executive director of the WMEP, the Wisconsin Manufacturing Extension Partnership, show up at my office and say that the governor signed off that he wouldn't veto it in the budget. However, my speaker was continuing to throw it down the tubes because it might make the Democratic governor look good. What could I do? Well, I had 24 hours, and I called a press conference. I couldn't use my own assembly parlor because the House Speaker, my speaker, wouldn't allow it. So I needed to use the state Senate parlor, full of press, with the CEOs and government relations people of John Deere, Harley Davidson, Oshkosh Truck, Mercury Marine, all standing behind me with the most vulnerable Republican state senator standing next to me, who is a co-sponsor. And she would lose that seat in the Republican state Senate if this didn't go through. Now, I thought that would be enough to get this thing passed, but the ace in the hole was a phone call to the president of the WMC, the Wisconsin Manufacturing and Commerce, who called my Assembly House Speaker and told him to behave now. That's what it takes to get things done, unfortunately. But see the press as an ally, please. If you're speaking the truth and you're principled in your leadership and your ideas, the press is your friend. And you will need that snow fence if you're a libertarian Republican or a libertarian Democrat leader in this society.
That's a good example of a non-legislative, where you use your position to push. That's great. Thank you.